Hi, Lou, and thanks for joining me on the show. Please tell the listeners where you're from and a little bit about yourself. Oh, we can't hear you. You're kind of echoey. Yeah. Um, all right, there we go. So go ahead and tell us where you're from and what you do. Hi, Lou, and thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. Please tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you do.
Sure thing. I'm Leo Sterling Jr., but nowadays most people just call me Sterling. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, but reside in Miami Gardens, Florida. I used to be a math tutor, but now I'm actually a self employed journalist.
Good stuff. So, this is my first time interviewing you. Usually, it's the other way around. You write books about barefooting, and you've interviewed me a few times for them. Can you tell the listeners about some of those books?
Sure thing. I know I first started doing books on my Wattpad, which is at Barefoot Poet Advocate, but now I decided to turn my actual studies into actual books. So right now I'm posting everything that I did on my Wattpad onto my Instagram and my Facebook as like little infographics, and then at the same time I'm creating actual books uh, on a few topics from barefooting, math, and even poetry, which is going to take a while because I realized when I rechecked my Wattpad, there's like over almost 100 plus entries. So I gotta see if I can finish that sometime this year.
So, you originally started publishing on Wattpad. Why did you choose that one to publish on over everything else?
Originally, I was first told about Wattpad during my junior year of high school, but I didn't really start posting on there until, say, my freshman year in university, before I had to stop. So from there, I pretty much was more open with myself, like okay being barefoot in public and such, since high school was, well, high school.
Yeah.
Then from there, from there, it's pretty much just I didn't really have anyone to really talk to much in person with regards to like barefooting or writing and such. So I pretty much just went online and pretty much talked to people that way. I was mostly an introvert, but now I'm trying to be more open with me being a writer and a journalist as a whole. And ever since then, I've made a lot of good friends from poets and writers, and one of my best friends is a screenplay writer, actually. So I'm grateful that I was able to make that change.
That's awesome. And you said that you're trying to turn your books into actual books, which I assume you mean physical copies of books. What platform are you using for that?
I'm actually writing some books using Microsoft Word. However, am challenging myself to create some books on one website called Overleaf, which they have a programming language called LaTeX. And yes, that is the actual name of the programming language. I don't know why it's called LaTeX, but it's supposed to be like a math and science like computer programming language that I've self taught myself on my 19th birthday. Uh, which the only reason I actually self taught myself it on my 19th birthday was because no one actually called me on my birthday. So I was like, if no one calls me by the end of the night, I'm just gonna self teach myself something random. And from there, I just pretty much improved my skills ever since self teaching. So I guess thanks to everyone who never called me on my birthday. I guess.
I mean, like a bummer that they didn't call you, but you got something positive out of it. That's a really positive
Yeah,
way to be proactive about bettering yourself. So good on you for doing that.
thank you.
So how do you come up with the ideas for the books that you write?
It's just it kind of takes one day at a time, really. Like I know sometimes some of my writing, whether it's for books or actual articles that I'm writing for journalism, it's pretty much just basically everyday stuff. So, say for the books, is basically just experiences that either I've had or what people have posted online. Because I know I was in a few. Let's see. Well, the poetry book, the regular poetry book, that one was basically just one I started back in high school. So that was just based on random events, random situations. Then I expanded from that into a second poetry book dedicated just to all poems about going barefoot and being barefoot. And some of them were based on my personal experiences, while others were based on other people's experiences that they've actually shared online or have personally told me. And those experiences, some of them did take a while to create an actual poem, which I've turned some of them into spoken word poems. I haven't performed any of them as yet since ever since all this. It's really hard to really do any spoken word. But from there, I since that and journalism is basically the toughest one out of the three, to be honest, since I try to be different from the average journalist, like writing about every single current event and stuff like that. I just try to go for like what's specific, what's detailed, and up to date. Because I know the most the reason I started journalism, well, besides high school, was pretty much the beginning of this, well, technically pandemic, but actually it's an epidemic. I actually have the study guide over here. If, and it's kind of hard to actually see it, but it's actually titled the 2020 Census, an unauthorized recipe for the coronavirus. And basically, this one kind of was like a biblical aspect as to why the coronavirus is even a thing, why it's here, and stuff like that. And through like a biblical perspective, it turned out it's actually because uh, America did the 2020 census being taken. It's a long story, but it's this one alone was 9 pages to write to give to people.
Interesting. And I'm sure that would be a fascinating read to see how you've connected the 2020 census through biblical study to the coronavirus. That must have been quite a link to come up with that.
It was. I will admit that one. That one is actually the reason I actually started my journalism business, and that one took, oh boy, 3 months to write on paper and a week and a half to type all of it on using latex programming. And right now I am writing a couple more about COVID with regards to if it's pneumonia and face mask. But one new one is actually honestly a massive shocker, really. I know I told a friend of mine just before I came on here about it, but I didn't say the whole details, so I didn't spoil it to her. But one is about uh, this election itself and about uh, for me, I normally try not to use like I'm not a person that is into like using like the race card or anything like that, but I know when it was during this election, the black community was like super excited that Trump was out of office, surprisingly, and it was funny. Like I even heard fireworks just the other night, the night he actually left. I'm like, what are y'all doing? And then I forgot it was that same day. But I realized, surprisingly, this one also comes from not just the American history aspect, but also a biblical aspect, which I'm going to post the introduction in February for Black History Month as a surprise. Whoops. as a surprise for everyone, which surprisingly, uh, I'm not sure if I should spoil the actual reason.
You don't have
Really,
to if you don't want to.
just wait till Instagram, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned a lot of how other people felt about the election and Trump leaving. How did you feel about all of that?
It's funny because I'm actually super neutral when it comes to politics. I mean, yeah, I did take AP comparative politics in high school, and to be honest, I was not a fan of it. I was, I mean, I'm 24 now. I still confuse Democrats and Republicans. So I mean, it's for me. I've always been neutral with regards to politics. I understand it, just not like a fanatic or hardcore studier for it. I'm, I'm like I said, I try to be like different from like the average journalist or writer when it comes to the politics. I know how to write about it. It's just I'm just not a fond of writing about it, despite people should know the truth about stuff that actually goes behind the scenes and such.
For sure. I think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors going on.
There
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Um
You'll see it in every.
yeah, that's a rabbit hole we won't go down in this interview. Yeah, so moving on from politics, let's talk about something a little bit happier. You write about barefooting a lot. That's something we both are quite passionate about. I've been living barefoot since 2010. You talked a bit about going barefoot yourself. Can you tell the listeners a bit about that and why you write about it?
Sure thing. I I first started growing an interest towards going barefoot more often in the summer of 2013 when I was transitioning from what was this? When I was switching schools, going to oh geez, what type of school was that? A college program school for a bit, and that book over the summer pretty much gave me a better perspective on it, and to the point where I first did a project about it when I was in high school. I know I wasn't able to present it because I never had like we never had to do any presentations and stuff about like books or anything. But from then, I decided to just challenge myself to do that project. And after a couple of years, the creator of the book actually saw it and he really liked it as well. To be honest, and I was grateful for that. Then, while I was in that college program in high school, a pen pal of mine said, uh, "Why not I write a poem about going barefoot?" So I'm like, okay. I mean, I wrote poetry at the time, so I thought, why not? And from there, it was just going to be just only one book for poetry. But then from then on, I was just writing more poems about barefooting than I expected, to the point it's now becoming its own book itself instead of just one book. So instead of one poetry book, I'm writing two. Well, technically two and a half, since one of them is a poetry book and the other one is the same thing but with just with pictures. Then from there, I since I'm starting my own journalism business, I am writing articles as well on barefooting as well. I haven't finished any of them as yet, but I'm working on all of them as we speak.
That's awesome. And where do you publish your journalism articles?
For now, for and at first the barefoot journalism was just on my Wattpad for when I was able to just talk to people who were okay with like sharing their thoughts and adventures on barefooting. But now I plan on expanding it right now to both academia as well as currently trying to create my own website for my business so people can actually see all of my articles as well. Then once I actually get my Facebook back, I'm gonna post on there as a marketplace so that people can read those for free.
That's awesome. Yeah. For your poetry, have you dealt with writer's block? And if so, how do you overcome that?
Writer's block I have dealt with a lot of times, both both for poetry and uh, journalism. One thing I sometimes do is just try to relax, really, like try to find a way to just calm my mind or just come and relax myself. Other times I know I'll just go to the library and just sit there for a while to just think of stuff. Uh, Depending on the day, it's either relax at home in my room by myself, go to the library for a few hours, or sometimes go on a barefoot walk, actually, which does help with relaxing the mind and de-stressing your belt. You're stressing yourself so that you can actually think of something for later on.
That definitely, those are all great ways. It's not usually how I do it. I find reading the news actually helps me, but I write stuff that's like crime and terrorism. So, the news helps me with getting those kind of creative juices flowing, especially lately. Yeah.
Yeah, same
Um,
thing. It's like my house. You'll like never see the news on in my house unless it's like, oh, some stores giving away free stuff or stuff like that.
those are the good ones. Yeah, I love those
Yep.
ones. Yeah. um, yeah, the news usually isn't happy.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, barefoot walking, that's got to be way more inspirational for poetry than watching the news would be. Has COVID affected going barefoot for you at all?
uh, COVID. I have paid attention to COVID. To be honest, even with the studies I do, it's just pneumonia, which is just inflammation of the lungs, which can lead to a cardiac arrest, which I have lost a few people last year because of that. So I understand how that can be. It's not easy, but in terms of COVID as a whole, it hasn't really affected me in terms of going barefoot. It just semi affected me on minor traveling at times. Not so much traveling like out of state or like uh, out of town, just traveling in the city itself. So I kind of just saw myself like walking a bit more often than taking the free trolley to places. Which I mean, I was okay with it. I didn't mind. I always enjoy going on the free trolleys here in Miami Gardens. They're a lot of fun, and the sightseeing is always a good experience as well.
I'm glad you haven't had any personal bad experiences with COVID, and that you've still been able to keep up barefooting. A lot of people have been expressing concerns toward me that my going barefoot is somehow going to give me COVID, which it's a respiratory illness. It's not
Thanks.
connected. So,
Yeah,
um, yeah.
I was told that before, not to me personally, but people have said that someone has told them that, and they're like, "This is why I'm writing a book on myths, just because of stupidity like that."
Yeah, and I addressed that in my book, A Brief Guide to Barefooting, as well as people are always not. This was before COVID, but I mean, even before,
Yeah,
the people are like, "Oh, you might get sick because of your bare feet." Like, how?
that's still. I've never been sick once ever since being barefoot more often.
Not from being barefoot, anyway.
Nope.
Yeah. Who would you say is the most inspirational barefoot person that you've met through your writing journey? And don't say me.
Oh, I actually was about to say you because I mean you actually were well you actually were one of my first inspirations when I first heard about you, and I was at first I was super surprised when I heard that you went barefoot in the snow, which is surprising to me because I am in Miami Gardens. There is no snow. You'll never see. The only thing white and falling are people's like lice hair or whatever. That's not snow. That's something else. All right. but, um, but I at first when it comes to the snow, I was actually surprised when I first heard about it. Um, for me, I mean, yeah, I have lived in New York, but I didn't stay that long in New York. I grew up most of my life here in Miami Gardens. I would definitely revisit New York for sure, and if if it does snow or even in London, where my parents are from. I mean, I would definitely give it a try if I was like living by myself and such. Another person in terms of my barefooting journey was one professor who did write a math book, not math book, a barefooting book, which ironically he semi-inspired me to write a math book at the same time. But
Is that Daniel Howell?
yeah, Daniel. And because originally I was planning on being a math teacher, but I was only to be a tutor, and then had to stop my studies as for being a math teacher. So, I was okay with it though. I mean, it's definitely a different 180, really. Comparing to be a math teacher, that'll be barefoot more often, which I have tutored barefoot before to people, and they were totally okay with it. They understood here in Miami Gardens. Then I know it was mostly you two, and there was a third person, technically somewhat a pen pal of mine, the one that inspired me to actually write poems about going barefoot years ago as a challenge. Then, so pretty much she inspired me to actually not only write just one poem about it, but I have a book that just dedicated to it.
That's great. So talking about Daniel Howell, his book talks about 50 ways or 50 reasons to go barefoot. What would you say is the best reason that's in his book? If you could think of one, what one do you think is the best reason?
Definitely one of them that's helped me a lot personally is to de-stress, because I realized the more you actually are like being grounded, you're easier to relieve the tension that is in your body from whether it's like mental or physical or even sometimes financial stress at times. And I have personal experience that helping out me a great deal. And I'm actually grateful that he actually published that book, because that was the one that inspired me to do it more often. And I actually have a friend of mine that is reading it right now. Actually, I recommended it to her. She's read some of it so far, and she really likes the concept on it.
That's great. Yeah. Daniel and I have spoken quite a lot. There's a lot of things we disagree on, but barefooting is one of the things we agree absolutely 100% on. So we're definitely on the same wavelength on that one. And for your books, I'm sure, like I've read a few of them, but I haven't read all of them. Which one of your books would you recommend that my listeners would read first?
Ooh, good question. On Wattpad, definitely the first book I did, which is a Barefooter's Interviews. That was the original book I did for all of the barefoot journalism that I did on Wattpad before as I'm working on converting them into actual journalism articles. But for when the books I'm currently working on that I definitely would like to publish this year, one of them would definitely be the for barefooters or those that like going barefoot, the barefooting book, the barefoot poetry book I'm working on, which I'm actually almost done.
That's
It's
awesome.
entitled. Oh, what did I title it? I just said the title yesterday. Do I have it here? Oh, that's it. The Shoeless Stories of Poetry.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I have some of your poems here. Would it be okay if I read one of the poems on here and then you tell my listeners a little bit about the story behind that particular poem?
Sure thing.
Okay. What are some things? Oh, no, that's not the poem. Hang on. That was the interview. Where'd it go? I had it. Where'd it go? Awkward when it's an interview and you have it. Where'd it go? Yeah. Every time I walk barefoot. There it is. Every time I walk barefoot, people would give me odd expressions. I don't care if they stare, and this is one of the confessions. You become more aware with your surroundings and enjoy the pleasure of sensation. It's also known as earthing, and to my feet, it's a vacation. I'm not saying to my shoes, I don't want you anymore. I'm just trying to feel different for a while. I'll try it next at the dollar store. Since it's essential to good health and helps aid the sense of touch, I'll probably do it next time my friends do some double dutch. For they are feeling free and in nature, and my shoes are still talking. With 10 toes and 2 soles, it's my bare feet who are walking.
I remember that one, and I realized I wrote the Dollar Tree one out of random comedy. But that one actually was based on uh, one friend of mine's in Argentina. Yeah, Argentina. She is like barefoot, like to the max, really. And she does it like almost all the. She does it literally every single day in public. She doesn't mind what people say or what people do. She just straight up does it without hesitation. And basically, her story pretty much inspired me to write that one. I know, uh, I know she didn't say anything about the dollar store, but I do remember going to the dollar store to actually like get some just get some like supplies and stuff for when I had to write the poetry book. So that one actually did come in handy. And nowadays, I actually wear barefoot sandals, which you can get some of the. If you want to make your own, I mean, you can actually get some of the supplies from Dollar Tree, like beads, strings, and stuff like that.
And those are the barefoot sandals that they look like they're a sandal on the top, and then they just loop over your toe and you tie them around your ankle.
Yep.
Yeah, I've had a pair of those and they're pretty. I like them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just a few more questions for you and then we'll close. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received and what advice would you give to my listeners about going barefoot?
The best advice that I was given personally was uh, just literally take it one step at a time, because I know some people try to transition immediately, like in public, while others try to do it like at a slow pace, while accepting the area that you live in not always tend to be that very calming. So sometimes it's just best to just go one step at a time, whether by yourself or uh, have someone do it with you who is okay with doing it. For me personally, I did it by myself at first. Then it transitioned to now I have a friend of mine that we go on barefoot walks together, whether at a park or nature trail and such. Uh, to give to others, definitely it would be don't be afraid, because for sure I know people like even from that poem like never let people's like thoughts or such like affect your feet from uh, having an adventure really, because I know in that book I have one saying in there that says I can find it. Never let people. Where to go? If I'm correct, it's never let people's thoughts ruin your feet's fun, adventure, and experience.
I love that. Yeah. I always tell people free your feet and your mind will follow. And it's just because other people have a closed mind doesn't mean you have to have enclosed feet.
Exactly. And I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. If listeners want to find you online, where can they find you?
For now, until I get my Facebook back, so I'm having some issue with that. You can mostly find me right now, mostly on my Instagram, which is at the Sterling Studies, TheSterlingStudies. I know I plan on expanding a little more on social media in terms of more than just Facebook and Instagram. I know I plan on doing Twitter. I do use Twitter, just not so much since that one's going to be more, I guess, that to me, Twitter is more political based, which, but I'm okay with it though.
Yeah, Twitter is a special place.
Yep. Yeah, but for now, mostly Instagram, which is at the Sterling Studies. I know I do plan on doing create a Fiverr account for my business as well for those who are interested in me, want me to help them out with any writing of some sort. Then from there, I'm trying to just expand. So if I'm able to come back on here, I definitely will let you know on updates.
For sure. I consider you a personal friend and a friend of the podcast. So once you get those other books out there, I'll for sure be glad to have you back and we can talk about them again.
Sure thing. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.